Hello, everybody. Buddy Webb, Midland, Texas. I did a Facebook post earlier that I think is real interesting. It's very important, and I wanted to share it with everybody. I'm going to show you what I created. It come from a conversation. I created this meme here. And it's dated here. It was last week Tuesday. Okay, and this is actually two different people I'm talking to right here, and I'm just going to go through it real quick. It's not long. It says, here's a woman documented saying that child sex trafficking was going on at the oil show parties, and another woman telling me that she witnessed a murder in Odessa that involved a human sex trafficking ring and an Odessa police officer, but there seems to be nobody to report this to. I've already contacted the police, the Texas Rangers, DHS, FBI, IG, elected officials, and the press. They're all working together, and it doesn't matter how much proof or evidence that you have. That's really kind of what this Facebook post was about today. There's just an absurd amount of evidence. 50 other homeowners documented reporting people in the attic after I'm ambushed and shot. Saying somebody's in my attic. Multiple people documented saying that underground homes and tunnels are here with secret recordings, and then Google Maps showing an underground facility in my backyard, believed to be where a young girl was murdered at in 2010. The previous owner of my home, he dies a week before the 2008 oil show started. I'm told there's 4 people died in my house. It's just crazy. But here, let me show you this story right here. This woman says, I was a former escort and went to almost every oil show in Midland, Odessa from 2008 to 2019 till I was taken in November. I got away, etc., etc., etc. I said, my friend Angie was leaving my home and at the parties, the oil show parties in 2010, and we talked on the phone while she drove there, so I knew they were 5 minutes from my home. This was before I found out there was an underground home in the backyard. She was the one that told me about the young girl that was murdered that year. And then this woman replied, and she says, yes, I believe it. I was 16, 17 at the time, and they would prefer us younger girls other than the elder women as well, I've already suspected that. That young girl was, Andy told me about, was murdered, and then the remains of a 14 to 21-year-old girl was found outside of Midland. Nobody's trying to solve it. If they were, they'd expose these underground homes, And all that's happened is they smear my name, and I'm the crime victim, and destroyed my life, And here's the next conversation from a different person, and right at the same time. It says, we were also caught up in a human sex trafficking ring in Odessa being orchestrated at the Travelodge Motel, Studio 6, and one other motel along that strip of hotels in Odessa. Officers were also involved. The whole deal was a setup, and luckily we got away. That same night, I witnessed 2 black guys shoot and kill somebody behind the Studio 6 motel while the police looked out. The whole time, the officer watched me as I was traumatized as what I was witnessing. It's just crazy and I 100% believe this. Absolutely 100%. Angie was afraid to report the murder of that young girl at the oil show party and said high-level police were at the party. A guy running for sheriff, Joe Lozano, I secretly recorded him. He told me that our last sheriff, the underground homes, was a hideout for the last sheriff, Gary Painter. Then 11 secret police caught at my house. I had to save up disability money and offer a reward to get them identified. We now know that police were under my home. Somebody under my home had shot me by surprise with my phone lines cut. It is absolute lawlessness. I've gone to all these different law enforcement agencies, and nobody will do anything. I thought about sending what I just wrote up to the U.S. Inspector General, which wouldn't be my first time to contact them, because they're the ones that are supposed to investigate corruption in the FBI and the DHS and then the DEA, etc., federal departments. And that's the problem here, is that the Fed's job is to investigate public corruption. Well, how much more corrupt can you get than secret police gangs planting evidence, that's all there is to it. This is public corruption, but they're all working together, and I can't get anything done, Here we go. I'm just going to start. Just last week, one woman told me that she was going to oil show parties starting long before she was 18 years old, and it was true. They prefer the younger girls than the older women. Another woman told me that she witnessed a human trafficking sex ring murder that an Odessa police officer was involved in, but there's nobody to report these crimes and murders to. I've contacted every law enforcement group that I can think of, along with elected officials and the press. It doesn't matter how much evidence you have, as we have lost rule of law. Okay. And here's the history. My first call to the FBI was from a company phone at work, and I spoke with the Dallas office about the repeated burglaries at my home. This was in 2011 and before the murder attempt. The ex-wife had suggested that these criminals had tunneled under my home, and in January 2012, about 2 weeks before the murder attempt, I called the El Paso DEA and then the Midland DEA, and I reported a suspected tunnel, but they didn't look, and 2 weeks later, I was ambushed and shot by somebody under my home. The question had been asked if somebody at the DA's office had set me up to be murdered after I called them and reported crime, and or if other citizens had called them and they're now dead because they did their civic duty and called the DEA like I did. I returned from the hospital in February 2012, crippled for life, after calling out to survive being ambushed and shot by somebody under my home with my phone lines cut and burglar alarms going off in the attic. I called the Midland FBI office. The FBI states on their website that public corruption is a top priority, which poses a fundamental threat to national security and way of life. It impacts everything from how well our borders are secured and our neighborhoods protected, to verdicts handed down in courts, to the quality of our roads, schools, and government services. It takes a significant toll on our pocketbooks, wasting billions in tax dollars every year. I'm 100% in agreement, but words are cheap, right? At this time, I had pictures of police in my home and staging the crime scene of this premeditated murder attempt that left me crippled for life, which I couldn't get identified, and it's now known that police were under my home on that night. I was speaking with the FBI agent named Sherry Rice. This was on the phone, and I was telling her that on the day that I was shot, I cleaned my microwave oven, and when I returned from the hospital 10 days later, it was filthy. This proved that somebody had been in my home while I was gone. She asked me who I thought was behind this murder attempt, and I said that I suspect it's organized crime, and I still do. She then says in a smart tone of voice, "So let me get this right. You say the mob shot you because your microwave was dirty." At that moment, I knew she was dirty, and for some unknown reason, she was trying to cover up for these would-be killers who have been compared to Charles Manson and his gang. They cut the phone lines to Sharon Tate's house when they murdered 5 people. My cell phone had been stolen, and my home phone lines were cut before I was shot by surprise. A few months later, I ordered the police reports, and I noticed that I didn't have a report showing any police at my home when the security cameras showed Martin County Sheriff John Woodward and the late Midland Sheriff Deputy Mike Naylor arriving at my home 19 minutes after I crawled out without being dispatched. I didn't know who they were for 6 years, as they were not identified until 2018 when Empire Private Investigations collected the $2,000 reward money and identified all 11 of the secret police. A larger group was later seen in my bedroom that night after attempting to, but failing to, disable my security camera. One of those pictures shows Detective Rosie Rodriguez leaned over my nightstand where my stolen cell phone had been planted behind my nightstand. It had been stolen before I was shot. Based on the timestamps, it looked like Rosie Rodriguez and April Chandler waited for the other police to leave my bedroom before planting the stolen phone. It wasn't there when I was shot. I took the police reports that I had ordered and those security camera pictures to the Midland FBI office, and I said, "Here is irrefutable evidence that certain Midland police were involved in a capital attempted murder." That day, I spoke with a Lamar Pruitt and another agent named Dominic. I was pointing out to Agent Dominic that the bomb squad was ordered to my home on the second entry on February 1st, 2012. And I said that you don't need the bomb squad after you've already been in the home. And he said, "You got that right." It's now known they never planned on anybody finding out they were in my home on the night I was shot when they were staging the crime scene. They illegally withheld the police report that timestamped the police in or at my home, which were not seen arriving on the security cameras. This is what proved that police were under my home on that night. During this conversation, I suggested that maybe the underground homes, which the ex-wife had already told me about, was an illegal casino brothel. And he said real slow, maybe. The way he said this confirmed what I suspected. A lady later said, I've had a lot of people here recently in the past week talking about underground tunnels here and discussing the underground. Word here in Midland is how there's a game room here that all the high officials go to, and bet money, and win money and whatever else is they do down there. I have the print screen of the conversation. And you know what she's talking about? She's talking about prostitution. Dominic told me they would investigate, but nothing happened. So I've kept calling and going back up there to the FBI office. On one of these visits, a different agent named Powers met me in the foyer and told me, you need to go see a doctor and don't ever come back up here again. And I looked at him and I said, they're going to keep on killing. And I see the look of shame come over his face. They've been trying to call me crazy regardless of the evidence in an effort to cover up for these cold-blooded killers who have wrecked homes all over the country, and I suspect murdered the young girl at the underground oil show party in October 2010 after killing the previous owner of my home the week before the 2008 oil show started. In fact, Aaron Packelhofer told me that 4 people had been died in my home. I have the print screen for that too. In 2015, I told my story to U.S. Congressman Mike Conaway on a phone call town hall meeting, and he invited me to his Midland office. I provided his staff a huge amount of evidence and then spoke with them in person about these crimes. I then got an official letter from Congress advising me to contact U.S. Inspector General Horowitz. The IG is supposed to investigate allegations of corruption in federal departments such as the DEA, FBI, and DHS. I contacted them over 100 times without ever getting a response back. Conaway had sent me on a dead end. I continue to find evidence and now I've identified multiple people saying that tunnels and underground homes are near my home with supporting evidence such as Google Maps. One of these was a sheriff candidate that I secretly recorded who told me that the underground homes was the hideout for our last sheriff, Gary Painter. A CAD programmer told me that she worked on this underground safe house project that was completed in 1987 with a budget of $7.35 million on permit while she worked for PBK. She said it was put in for George H.W. Bush from Midland when he was vice president. It was found out the permits were accidentally deleted in 2015 by the city of Midland. If you look up my address, 3802 Fair Circle, Midland, Texas, on Google Maps, then you'll see a large building in my backyard that can't be seen from above ground or the sat screen. This is one of the underground homes. Okay. My friend Angie McGee Hurley told me about a young girl that was murdered at an oil show party in October 2010, and I knew this party was 5 minutes drive from my home because we were talking on the phone while she drove there. It's easy to see those parties were going on in the underground homes, and most likely the one in my backyard or the one believed to be a half block away on Westmont Court. In June 2016, I mailed a 3-ring binder of evidence to FBI Supervisor Brandon Griffith, included a flash drive full of audio-video evidence by registered mail. This included evidence about the premeditated murder attempt on my life, but also the suspected murder of Mike Lawhon, previous homeowner, who died the week before the 2008 oil show started, and the murder of the young girl at the 2010 oil show party, along with proof of the horrific medical crimes committed against me, and also evidence on the Haley Dunn murder. I then get a phone call from FBI agent Powers, who was the same agent that had told me not to return to the FBI office in 2012. And I secretly recorded this call, which is now posted on YouTube. The name of that video is Public Corruption is Our Top Priority, FBI. He wanted to talk to my family, and I suspected this was because he was trying to smear my name to cover up the crimes and murders. I've suspected they've been threatened, but I don't have proof of that. He specifically mentioned my oldest daughter, Jennifer, that mysteriously quit talking to me after the murder attempt. She was the daughter that I was told had been raped, and I suspect that was by people in the same crime ring. I explained that my family doesn't live in town and reminded him that I'd already provided them the numbers for my family in 2012, but he acted like they didn't have that anymore. This made me wonder if they had destroyed the evidence that I had given them. Okay. I mentioned the girl that was murdered at the oil show party, but he didn't want to talk about that. He told me that I could come by and pick up the evidence packet or he would destroy it. I have another copy, so I purposely didn't pick it up, knowing that if he was going to destroy evidence in multiple murder cases. It's my understanding that tampering with or destroying evidence is a crime. This is on the secretly recorded phone call that is posted on YouTube. I was later told that FBI Supervisor Brandon Griffith quit the FBI and went to work for XTO, which is a mobile Exxon company. I had wondered if this large oil company had people at the underground oil show party in 2010 when the young girl was murdered for refusing to prostitute. If so, I bet they don't want the public to find out about these underground sex parties. In 2019, I created another packet of evidence and I provided this to Homeland Security. They're supposed to take care of human trafficking, and this is exactly what murdering young girls who won't prostitute at underground oil show parties is about. I suspected the many people in the attic crimes are also connected with this human trafficking ring. On July 2nd, 2019, I met DHS agent Paul Cervantes at the Midland Home Depot, and I showed them where I believed a tunnel was located going from there to my home and used by the people that were going to the underground oil show parties. You could see it on Google Earth Maps. I got the feeling that Paul was more interested in me selling my home and moving than he was in stopping this murderous crime ring. 2 weeks later, the ground was dug up and concrete was poured, but I got it on video and that went viral. 2 more weeks and U.S. Congressman Mike Conaway announced his retirement, and come to find out, his late brother-in-law used to live across the street from my home, which has an underground home in the backyard that was used for the oil show party murders. 3 months later, U.S. Secretary of DHS Kevin McClellan resigned, and then 6 days later, U.S. Secretary of Energy Rick Perry resigned. I suspected some multi-billion-dollar oil companies were leaning on them to help cover up the oil show party murders, and they were involved in pouring concrete to cover up the human trafficking murder tunnel. DHS agent Cervantes tells me that it's not their job to investigate human trafficking if the human traffickers murder one of the human trafficking victims. He suggested that I contact the FBI and said, they have a lot of new people down there and they're not dirty anymore. I went to the Midland FBI office once again under the advice of this DHS agent and provided them the same packet of evidence that I had provided them. I was telling my story to an agent who refused to give me his name. Every time I asked him, he told me to call him Duty Agent. He told me that he believes that I have a mental condition, so I pulled out a report from the hospital showing that I've been cleared by mental health, but he disagreed with the doctors. I then showed him proof of multiple other homeowners who have reported people in the attic, and he ignored this too. I finally said, can we agree that if I wasn't shot with my gun, then I was shot with another gun? And I started quoting the evidence proving that I wasn't shot with my gun. He got very angry about this, as it was clear to me that he was covering up a premeditated capital murder attempt that police were involved in, along with the multiple other murders believed to be connected with the underground homes and this crime ring. I called the U.S. Inspector General again and told them about the concrete being poured 2 weeks after showing DHS where I believed the human trafficking murder tunnel was located, and then sent them a letter. But once again, nothing changed, and the crimes at my home have never stopped, day after day after day. The reason is easy to see on Google Maps, as there's an underground home in my backyard where they were having oil show parties and where they murdered a young girl in 2010. They keep trying to terrorize me into selling my home, even though I've now identified over 50 other homeowners reporting people in the attic. On New Year's Day, I spoke with a woman who told me she lost $75,000, her life savings, due to buying a home with people in the attic. This is going on all over the country. In the last couple of weeks, one woman told me, I was a former escort and I went to almost every oil show in Midland, Odessa from 2008 2019. And I said, my friend Angie McGee Hurley told me about a young girl that was murdered at an oil show party in 2010, which happened 5 minutes drive from my home. And she said, and I was 16, 17 at the time, and they would prefer us young girls other than the elder women as well. Child sex trafficking. Here's a woman telling me that child sex trafficking was going on at the oil show parties, which I'd already suspected, but I don't know if there's any legitimate law enforcement groups to tell this to. The remains of a 14 to 21-year-old girl were found outside of Midland in 2013, and nobody seems to care, because if they did, then they would expose these underground homes. A couple of days later, another woman told me we were also caught up in a human sex trafficking ring in Odessa being orchestrated at the Travel Lodge, Studio 6, and one other motel along that strip of motels in Odessa. Officers were also involved. The whole deal was a setup, and luckily we got away. That same night, I witnessed two black guys shoot and kill someone behind the Studio 6 motel while the police looked out. The whole time, the officer watched me as I was traumatized as what I was witnessing. An Odessa police officer was involved in murdering somebody in human trafficking, sex ring murder over there. She witnessed it. I have the print screens to these conversations, but I'm concerned it could place lives in danger due to the public corruption going on here, and there seems to be nobody to report this to. I've contacted the police, the Texas Rangers, the FBI, DHS, DEA, the Department of Justice, senators, congressmen, the last three presidents, and the U.S. Inspector General. I've also contacted hundreds of local, state, and national reporters. We have lost the rule of law. Public corruption is our number one problem. Okay. As I'm saying, I'm thinking about sending that letter right there over to the U.S. Inspector General. Send it registered mail once again, and and go, here's my experience with the DEA. Here's my experience with the FBI, and and they're the ones supposed to take care of public corruption, and that's what we got. That's the problem we got here, and you look what's happening. People are being murdered. Homes are being broken into all over the country, and then the crime victim, such as myself, is having our names smeared and our lives ruined. Okay, here I want to show you one more story. This was just on the internet yesterday. Okay, this young girl, 16, pregnant star Jordan Cashmere, died at 26, and it tells a story. By 2017, Jordan was working at a strip club and ended up getting arrested for drug possession. It's a really sad story. Jordan was 26, but the point here, a reason I wanted to share this with you is this right here. Okay, I said multiple people told me that Haley Dunn's mom, Billy Dunn, was working as a stripper around the time she was reported missing in December 2010. And one woman said that she was taking 13-year-old Haley Dunn to the strip clubs with her. It makes sense that all of the strippers in the area were at the underground oil show parties in October 2010, which would place Billy Dunn and or Haley in my backyard. I have a feeling the high-level police that Angie said were at those parties wouldn't want anybody to find out this now famous missing murdered child was at a sex party with them, which may explain why her remains were found 2 days after I wrote the Department of Justice and suggested they search the underground homes for clues for Haley Dunn. That was in 2013. She had been missing for over 2 years at that time, and so that's what I'm saying. Colorado City is only 80 miles from Midland. That's where Billy and Haley Dunn is from. Okay, here's Janice Freeman Driver, and she's telling me, now, buddy, I heard that Billy, Haley's mom, from a reliable source, that Haley was going with her as well, but staying in the dressing room while Billy Dunn, BD, worked the stripper pole. Okay, and then here's a second person, the admin for Hope for Haley Dunn. Her name was Stacy, and she says, she's defending Billy because Billy's her friend, and she says, keep in mind, while she was stripping, it was a third job because Clint didn't work. She's a nurse. She was doing secretarial work. My point is, obviously, all the strippers were at the oil show parties, and I believe the oil show parties were going in the underground home. You can see on Google Maps in my backyard, and it's being covered up. That's where that little girl was murdered at. This is Buddy Webb, Midland, Texas.